War is often called a hidden tax. It's something that affects everyone, but only some people know about it. You can see it in their families, who have members who are gone for long periods of time. You can see it in their communities where homes are destroyed or shuttered up and empty. And you can see it in their eyes, haunted by the ghosts of things lost to violence. But war's true cost isn't just measured in human lives. It's also measured in the economy. But what are the costs? How are they different from taxes, and why should you care? That's what we'll investigate today. We're going to look at 9 ways your country's war economy hurts you. Let's get into it. Number 1. GDP declines sharply. Let's start with the most widely publicized economic cost of war, the decline in gross domestic product, or GDP. GDP measures the monetary value of everything a country produces and sells on the market. During wartime, GDP usually drops because resources get diverted away from producing consumer goods like phones and furniture and toward producing military goods like weapons and planes. This shift in resources leads to a drop in production of civilian goods, which leads to a drop in GDP. For example, when the U.S. entered World War II, its GDP fell by almost 10% in 1942, though it recovered and surpassed pre-war levels by 1943. Similarly, during the Vietnam War, the U.S. GDP declined by about 4% in 1968. Now, these percentages might seem small, but remember that GDP represents all the economic activity in an entire country. So even a tiny percentage represents hundreds of billions of dollars. Even wars that don't directly involve a country like the war in Ukraine can affect a country's economy. They can disrupt supply chains, cause inflation, and divert resources away from civilian production. For example, before the war, Russia was one of the world's largest exporters of wheat. But since the war began, many countries have stopped importing Russian wheat, which has led to shortages and higher prices around the world. This has caused the total GDP of the world to decrease by an estimated $3.3 trillion. Number 2. National budget gets reallocated. When a country goes to war, its national budget gets reallocated to fund the war effort. This means that money that would normally be spent on public services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure gets diverted to the military. For example, in 2021, the U.S. spent over $700 billion on defense, which was more than all other federal spending combined. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Many people argue that investing in national defense is essential to protect a country from threats like terrorism, war, and crime. But it does come at a cost. When money is spent on defense, it can't be spent on other things like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This can lead to a decline in living standards and a less competitive economy. What's more, the money spent on defense doesn't stay in the local economy. It's usually spent on things like weapons and ammunition, which are often imported from other countries. This means that money leaves the local economy and goes to defense contractors and foreign weapons manufacturers. For example, during the Iraq War, it was estimated that for every dollar the U.S. spent on the war, only 17 cents stayed in the U.S. economy. The rest went to defense contractors and foreign suppliers. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Defense spending can stimulate the economy by creating jobs and boosting profits for defense contractors. But it does mean that the money isn't being spent in a way that benefits the general public. No. 3. Inflation skyrockets. Inflation is a general increase in prices and a decrease in the purchasing power of money. When a country goes to war, inflation usually increases because of increased demand for goods and services, increased production costs, and decreased supply. During World War II, for example, inflation in the United States rose by over 13,000%. This was partly due to increased demand for consumer goods, but it was also due to price gouging and hoarding. In 2022, inflation in the United States was 8.5, the highest level in over 40 years. Some economists say that the war in Ukraine is to blame for this inflation, but others say that it's just a symptom of a larger problem. Number 4. Mass unemployment. When a country goes to war, there's often a sharp increase in unemployment. This is because people are drafted into the military or they choose to leave the workforce to take care of family members or to protest the war. During World War I, for example, unemployment in the United States rose from 2.7% to 15%. This was partly due to the draft, but it was also due to the fact that many men simply chose not to work while the war was going on. In 2022, unemployment in the United States is 3.7%, which is near historic lows. But some economists say that this is misleading because it doesn't take into account the millions of people who have given up looking for work. According to a report from the Economic Policy Institute, if you include discouraged workers in the unemployment rate, it's closer to 8%. This is still low by historical standards, but it's higher than most people realize. No. 5. Infrastructure is destroyed. When a country goes to war, its infrastructure can be severely damaged. This includes things like roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals. When infrastructure is damaged, it can make it difficult for people to travel, do business, and get the goods and services they need. This can lead to a decline in economic activity and a decrease in living standards. During World War II, for example, much of the infrastructure in Europe and Asia was destroyed. This made it difficult for countries to rebuild after the war, and it contributed to the start of the Cold War. In the United States, the war effort also took a toll on infrastructure. The government spent heavily on defense and the military, which left little money for other things like roads and bridges. By the end of the war, much of the country's infrastructure was in disrepair. No. 6. Foreign investment disappears. When a country goes to war, foreign investors often sell up and leave. This is because war is risky and uncertain, and no one wants to invest in a country that could be bombed or destabilized. When foreign investors leave, it can cause the currency to depreciate and the economy to slow down. For example, in 2015, when fighting broke out in Yemen, foreign investors sold up and left. This caused the Yemeni rial to depreciate by over 80%. It also led to a sharp increase in unemployment and poverty. Number 7. Human capital is damaged. Human capital is the skills and knowledge that workers have. When a country goes to war, human capital can be severely damaged. This is because people can be killed or injured, which means that they're unable to work. Additionally, people may be forced to flee their homes and become refugees. This can lead to a brain drain as the most skilled and educated workers leave the country. For example, during the Syrian civil war, it was estimated that over 500,000 people fled the country. This included many of Syria's doctors, engineers, and teachers. As a result, Syria's human capital has been severely damaged. No. 8. Debt increases massively. When a country goes to war, it usually borrows money to pay for it. This money is often borrowed from other countries or from international organizations like the World Bank. When a country takes on this much debt, it can lead to a number of problems. For example, the interest payments on the debt can be very high, which puts a strain on the economy. Additionally, if the country defaults on its debt, it can cause financial instability. For example, in 2011, Greece was on the brink of defaulting on its debt. This caused financial panic in Europe and nearly led to the breakup of the Eurozone. No. 9. Recovery takes decades. When a country emerges from war, it often takes decades to recover. This is because so much damage has been done to the economy, infrastructure, and human capital. As a result, people's living standards can remain low for many years after a war ends. For example, it's estimated that it will take Japan until 2030 to fully recover from World War II. Even then, it will have taken over 80 years for the country to rebuild. So those are 9 ways a country's war economy hurts you. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think? Is there anything we missed? Let us know in the comments below. Also be sure to check out our other videos. Thanks for watching.